Say man, it's your boy DAA man, Daylight TV, back at y'all with another Mafia Material profile piece, and on this trip, we mobbing out to Detroit with it. West Side to be exact, Puritan Avenue to be more exact. Yay. We're gonna be getting into the infamous life and times of T. Stuckey. Hit that like and subscribe button, ring that notification bell if you're really mobbing with the movement. Daylight TV, let's get it. Born THELMON STUCKEY III on March 21st, 1968 in Detroit, Michigan, he grew up on the city's west side on Puritan Avenue, around Stopel, Lilac, Prairie, and all that. Among his neighbors was Detroit rap legend D12 member and right hand to Marshall Eminem Mathers, Deshaun Proof Horton, a connection we'll get into later. But first, let me give y'all some insight into the Detroit that T. Stuckey grew up in. THELMON STUCKEY III would be born a year after the infamous riot of 1967, which saw over 1,000 buildings destroyed and $132 million in damages, which is about $1 billion in today's money. The riot would cause then Michigan Governor George W. Romney to send in the National Guard to restore order.
At the request of Mayor Kavanaugh, we've made state police and National Guardsmen available to assist in dealing with what is a case of lawlessness and hoodlumism, and to protect the persons and property of people in the areas involved.
The Detroit riots would become so infamous in history that it would be depicted in the 2017 feature film Detroit, which told the story of an incident that occurred during the riots at the Algiers Motel that left 3 dead and 9 assaulted and abused by members of the Detroit Police Department, Michigan State Police, and National Guard. He would be born just 2 weeks before the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King led to the subsequent riot in 1968 that rocked the city of Detroit to the point that Governor George W. Romney saw no other choice but to call in the National Guard, as he had done in the previous riot of 1967. If that Romney name is sounding familiar, it's because of his son Mitt Romney, who was the 2012 Republican presidential nominee. Another event that would rock the city of Detroit would occur just 8 days after T. Stuckey's first birthday, when on March 29, 1969, following a shootout provoked by Detroit police, which led to around a dozen armed officers from the Detroit Police Department invading the New Bethel Baptist Church and arresting 142 African Americans gathered for the National Convention of the Republic of New Africa, a black nationalist organization that the FBI had infiltrated. You see, after the riots of 1967 and 68, black power organizations were criminalized in the eyes of local and federal government.
The difficulties of covering major urban problems in cities as large as Detroit were dramatically illustrated last March when we covered a shooting at an inner city church. One policeman was killed and another seriously wounded. News 4 was on the scene with exclusive sound coverage within minutes of the first call on the police radio, "Officer in trouble." It began when a large group of black separatists, members of the Republic of New Africa, met in a church to plot their future plans. At about the same time, a 2-man scout car was cruising nearby, and the officers spotted about 10 youths in army fatigues standing on the corner near the church, some carrying rifles. The officers called police headquarters, saying that they would investigate. Moments later, their scout car was riddled with bullets and crashed across the street from the church. One officer was killed in that attack, his partner seriously wounded. Other officers rushed to the scene, responding to the same police call that prompted our camera crews. Police shot their way into the church, where they believed the gunman had taken refuge. Before the bullets stopped flying, 4 civilians had been wounded. Later, 135 persons were taken to police headquarters for questioning. News 4 sound cameras exclusively followed the action through the night, both at police headquarters and at Detroit General Hospital, where we talked to 2 of those who were...
On the bright side, though, the Detroit Lions had their best season in 7 years, finishing second in the NFL Central Division. Plus, Motown was still churning out hits out of Hitsville, USA, going on to have one of their most successful years. And probably most relative to who T. Stuckey would become, Kingpin Eddie Jackson and his partner Courtney Brown would rise to prominence in the heroin trade in 1969. This would start what many might call the first Motown Mafia era, which continued until 1975. Detroit in the 70s would also experience white flight, making Detroit become a majority black city, with the white population declining more than 425,000 and the black population increasing from 44% to 63%. 1970s Detroit would also see the inception of the Stress Unit, which stood for Stop the Robberies, Enjoy Safe Streets in 1971. The controversial unit was said to have defended white businesses in racially transitional neighborhoods against alleged black perpetrators with deadly force until it was disbanded in 1973. Hitting even closer to home for T. Stuckey, in 1977, just 2 years after the Eddie Jackson organization had sort of fizzled out, YBI, or Young Boys Incorporated, would set up their first heroin distribution spot on Puritan and Prairie, just 3 blocks away from where T. Stuckey would grow up, on Puritan and Stopel. By the 1980s, as T. Stuckey entered his adolescent and teenage years, auto industry closures and massive layoffs continued to cause economic and urban decay in Detroit. Mix that desperation with a fledgling drug market and the murder culture perpetuated by groups like the Best Friends Gang, and you have the era in which T. Stuckey would come of age. Little about his early life or when he jumped off the porch is documented, but one could assume that Stuck would likely become active in the streets in or around the mid-80s, because by 1988 he would be serving time for second-degree murder. While in prison, Stuckey would see an inmate put on a rap concert for other prisoners and be inspired to want to rap after seeing the attention and admiration the incarcerated MC received from his peers. After 4 years, Stuckey would have his second-degree murder conviction overturned. He hit the streets eager to realize his dreams of becoming a rapper and record company owner. He hooked up with his childhood friend Tone A.K. Scott, a man later dubbed the Dr. Dre of Detroit, who has worked with Motor City rap pioneers such as Blade Icewood down to recent stars such as Payroll Giovanni and more. At the time though, AK was part of a rap act called AK in the Flow and was having local success with a record called Step Up Thickness, which inspired T even more to want to make his rap dreams and goals a reality. We can assume Stuckey was getting into some type of bag because the infamous picture of him and with the orange mink and the matching hat is allegedly from 1993. In or around 1994 to 95, Stuck would meet Machi Ski, who was a part of Motown's pioneer rap group Detroit's Most Wanted, and was the grandson of legendary soul singer Jackie Wilson. Stuckey, Proof, Machi Ski, and another artist named Big Dog would form a rap group called the Forefathers. T also started Motor City Records as well as the Puritan record store. But while all this was going on, Stuckey was further building a reputation as a nigga that can't be fucked with. So much so that even the Detroit Police Department would develop a vendetta against him. One in particular was a Detroit police officer named Michael Jackson. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing y'all was thinking right now probably. And you know I had to play with the visual on this one, right? In his documentary, Stuckey said that Jackson told him if the Detroit Police Department didn't catch him, the feds would. But around this time, the police would not be the only one trying to get a shot at T. Stuckey. While at the Puritan record store with Tone A.K. Scott, he was shot by a man coming down the street from the direction of a nearby bus stop. One of the bullets hit him in the head and caused him to lose his sight temporarily. While recovering from the shooting, he moved his family and label to Atlanta and did not return to Detroit until 1997. Not long after returning to Detroit, Stuckey and Proof were passing out promotional flyers in the parking lot in the area of Greenfield and Schoolcraft. They found themselves fired upon by a man who was allegedly already shooting at other targets. Proof hands his gun to Stuckey and there's what appears to be a little bang out. The man who was shooting at Stuckey and Proof would drop his gun, hop in a waiting Benz and speed off. Stuckey would end up shot on the scene by Detroit police officers who would allege that he shot at them with an AK-47 that was found on the scene. At trial, Proof would testify on Stuckey's behalf, ultimately helping exonerate Stuckey as he would be found not guilty of attempted murder on the police. However, he was found guilty in federal court for possession of firearm by a felon and sentenced to 4 years. I should also note that this is around the time when Proof would bring Eminem to T. Stuckey. Stuckey would say that he missed the opportunity due to his involvement in the streets getting deeper. But members of the Puritan ad boys would say that T. Stuckey wasn't actually feeling Eminem at all. But anyway, Stuckey would sue the Detroit Police Department and receive a settlement for $150,000 after it was determined that Stuckey could not have shot at the police because he was shot in his back, which fit the defense that he was actually running when the police shot him, as well as there being no AK-47 shell casings found at the scene. Returning home from prison in 2001, he jumped back into the music business. He began managing E-Dub, one of the hottest rappers in Detroit at the time. He was deemed next to blow after Eminem had reached international stardom and put Detroit on the map. It would be a successful endeavor as E-Dub would secure a label deal with MCA Records. But while all of this was happening, authorities apparently still believed that T still had one foot in the streets, not to mention probably still had a vendetta that intensified, with T getting a murder conviction overturned, beating the police in court for the 1997 shooting, as well as suing the police department and winning. Yeah, they was on his ass. All this police scrutiny would catch up on March 7, 2002 when Stuckey was arrested in Dearborn, Michigan for gun possession and would post $50,000 bail. He would go on the run, deciding to seek refuge in Atlanta. To give some context into this scenario, by 2002, another Detroit street legend, Demetrius Big Meats Flannery, and his BMF organization had Atlanta on lock. I'm talking lock Schmidt-ass. If you know, you know. Stuckey, out of his own mouth, said that he considered Big Meats to be one of his best friends. T-Stuck, the PA Boys, and the Black Mafia family's close ties were even depicted in the BMF series on Starz, produced by 50 Cent. Being on the lam, T had the feds executing several search warrants on the homes and businesses of all of his known associates within the Detroit area while on the hunt for him, including that of his music business partner E-Dub. T. Stuckey's luck would run out when he would be apprehended in or around an apartment at 3350 Sweetwater Road in Lawrenceville, Georgia on September 6, 2002. He would be charged with numerous offenses after being on the run 1 day shy of 6 months. On January 23, 2003, 4 months after being taken into custody on gun charges and a fugitive warrant, a grand jury returned a 8-count superseding indictment that named Stuckey, Dennis Sifford, and Vidal Murray as co-conspirators. Count 1 charged all 3 defendants with conspiring to distribute cocaine and cocaine base in violation of 21 U.S.C. 841 and 846, with this alleged conspiracy spanning from sometime in 1993 to February 9, 2000. Stuckey would hire Jerome Barney, the lawyer who represented him in the 1997 case. Barney, however, had to recuse himself as counsel after a witness accused him of receiving $50,000 from Stuckey. I'm going to assume that they alleged the 50 must have been used for some type of payoff, because the feds would actually allege that Stuckey was involved in witness intimidation before his trial would begin, because the last time I checked, you were supposed to pay your lawyers. But anyway, with Jerome Barney stepping down from the case, Stuck would hire another prominent Michigan attorney named Anthony Chambers. On November 18, 2003, Stuckey's new lawyers, Anthony Chambers and Jeffrey Taylor, filed a motion to suppress evidence obtained from the apartment at 3350 Sweetwater Road, Unit 609 in Lawrenceville, Georgia, but to no avail, and T. Stuckey would begin trial in 2004. According to another attorney, S. Allen Early, The government would tell the judge that Stuckey had put a hit on the mother of the star witness in the case, which prevented him from seeing evidence within his discovery so that he could aid in his defense. The prosecution would initially seek the death penalty against Stuckey for the murder of Ricardo Slick Darbins, who was a former Detroit police officer who was fired after he and another officer forced a drug dealer to eat crack cocaine in 1988. The dealer overdosed but survived. Darbins had been indicted in federal court for several crimes unrelated to Stuckey. The theory is that T killed Darbins because he believed Darbins would rat him out for a time cut on the charges that he was facing. Darbins himself was accused of the attempted murder of an informant on his own case. So Stuckey's position is, if a dude is willing to go to that length for the code, why would he have any reason to fear that Darbins would provide any information on him, whether true or false? Therefore, there is no reason he would have felt the need to silence Darbins, especially when the government would accuse T of being the driver of the car when Darbins tried to kill the witness on his case at either a barbershop or record store. To make the charges stick even more, the federal government would cut a deal with a man named Steve Felder, an admitted murderer, in exchange for testifying against T. Stuckey. Now this is where shit gets messy on the prosecution's end, and you start to understand just how badly they wanted T. Stuckey off the streets. Stuckey's attorney, Anthony Chambers, would represent a man named Anthony Gates, who was charged with a murder where they alleged he killed the man, duct taped him, rolled him up in a rug, and left him in the trunk of a car. After about 3 weeks of trial, Gates was found not guilty. This all matters because the victim in the Anthony Gates case was found the same way Ricardo Slick Darbins would be found. Steve Felder would actually admit on the stand at Stuckey's trial that he committed the murder Anthony Gates was previously charged with. Now to sum that up, Steve Felder is the star witness in the Darbins murder case that Stuck is fighting, and pretty much confesses to a murder that was committed in the same fashion as the one that Stuckey was being charged with. And we know this because Anthony Gates was represented by Anthony Chambers, who's representing Stuckey in the case that we're talking about now. Y'all follow me? Alright, let's keep mobbing. Stuckey was also labeled the head of the Puritan Avenue Boys, and while awaiting his own trial, another indictment would be dropped on the PA Boys. An informant alleged that he was serving Stuckey bricks from 1988 to 1992. The problem with that is, Stuck was in prison, as we discussed earlier, from 88 to 92 on second-degree murder charges before having them overturned. With all of this contradictory evidence, Stuckey, as well as his attorney, Anthony Chambers, felt they had the murder case beaten and were on a good road to either winning the drug case or lowering the charges and subsequently the penalty. The prosecution would make one last desperate attempt to convict Stuckey by introducing his rap lyrics into evidence. They would claim that Stuckey described the murder in detail on one of his songs where he rapped, "I never been scared of you, stay one step ahead of you, kill your witnesses instead of you, I expose those who knows, fill their bodies with holes, wrap them in the blanket, dump their bodies in the road." The defense, however, would argue that Stuckey didn't write at least 80% of his lyrics. In turn, Assistant U.S. Attorney J. Michael Buckley would be quoted saying, "The evidence at trial proved that Mr. Stuckey was not involved in the music business at all. He was not a musician." Feeling like his lawyer's hands were tied, Stuckey would decide to bet on himself and take the stand in his own defense, despite his counsel advising against it because the prosecution would introduce various crimes Stuckey was accused of committing, further tainting his image in front of the jury. On July 22, 2004, a jury convicted Stuckey on 6 counts: conspiracy to distribute cocaine and cocaine base, murder to prevent a person from providing information concerning a federal crime to federal authorities, conspiracy to launder monetary instruments, felon in possession of a firearm, witness tampering, and laundering of financial instruments. The court then sentenced Stuckey for each offense as follows: a term of life imprisonment for conspiracy to distribute cocaine and cocaine base, mandatory life imprisonment for murder of a government witness, 240 months for both of his laundering related offenses, 120 months for felon in possession of a firearm, and another 120 months for witness tampering. All of Stuckey's sentences were to be served concurrently. Upon sentencing, when T would address the court, he would maintain his innocence, stating, "I'm going to rely on the appeals court and the Lord to look out for me." Stuckey told U.S. District Judge Gerald Rosen, "You set me up. You all in this room set me up. I'm an innocent man." Judge Gerald Rosen, however, would be quoted in an article saying that T. Stuckey convicted himself with his own testimony. "It was one of the greatest acts of self-destruction I've witnessed in a courtroom in 25 years, the judge said. That same year T. Stuckey would receive a life sentence, his longtime friend and former groupmate, Proof, would release his debut album, I Missed the Hip Hop Shot. His second album, Searching for Jerry Garcia, was released a year later in 2005. It rose to number 65 on the Billboard 200 charts. But that same year, another friend of Stuckey's, Demetrius Big Meech Flannery, would be picked up on an indictment for running a continuing criminal enterprise along with his brother, Terry Southwest T. Flannery, who was recently granted clemency from former President Joe Biden. On April 11, 2006, when Stuckey was about 4 years into his life sentence, his friend Proof was shot and killed at a Detroit club located on the city's famed 8 Mile. On December 17, 2010, Stuckey released a book titled Bloody Pollock, a creative testament to his resolve and resilience behind the wall. Y'all can actually purchase the book on Amazon and support the Roman. Stuckey had been locked up for 22 years, but his relationship with his family and community continues to withstand the test of time. He has 11 children, most of whom have gone to college, graduated, and went on to live productive lives, opposite of the trials and tribulations their father experienced before them. One of his sons has followed in his father's footsteps by embarking on his own music career, having gained assistance and guidance from Stuckey's longtime friend and early collaborator, Tone A.K. Scott. The last appeal I found for T. Stuckey was filed on January 14, 2020, for a sentence reduction pursuant to Section 401 and 404 of the First Step Act of 2018. But unfortunately, Stuckey's motion was denied. And boom, there you have it. Another Mafia Material profile piece on Detroit's very own, the pure Puritan, T. Stuckey. Free T. Stuck, man. Yay, yay. I decided to do this story because of what we're seeing right now in hip-hop, with lyrics being used as evidence to convict rappers on RICO charges and so on. People thought it was the first time it happened with rappers like Young Thug and, Boosie even. But yet, T. Stuckey predates all of that by nearly 10, 20 years, depending on what case you're looking at. I also think it's interesting how you had the biggest money makers from the streets of Detroit, like T. Stuckey, Big Meech, and even Brian Peanut Brown, who were in the music business pushing new artists and were taken off the streets right around the time that they would have broke ground in the industry. And it also makes you wonder if the popularity of Detroit's rap scene was possibly delayed like 10 years due to the primary investors either being indicted or killed. But what y'all think, man? Let me know. And if you're still here, I appreciate y'all mobbing with the content. Hit that like and subscribe button, help grow the channel. Also smack that notification bell if you really Mafia Material. Detroit, drop them tigers and them lions in the comments. Let me know if it's anything I might have left out. If y'all got any T. Stuckey stories not included in this piece, definitely let me know. And remember, Mafia is not a thing, it's a process. Trust the process, and as always, stay dangerous so you can be safe. It's your boy DAALIGHT, DAALIGHT TV. I'm out.